Hi there, I'm Margaret Evans, coming to you live from Harare. We've been, the CBC crew and I have been in Zimbabwe since last week, covering the events here. The military coup that's not described as a military coup by the generals who took over control here late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning. I'm with cameraman editor Richard Devey, producer Lily Martin, and I guess I'm going to start just by telling you a little bit about where we are right now. I'm talking to you from our hotel, which is a private guest house. And the reason that we've chosen this one is because relations between journalists and the Zimbabwean authorities have not always been very great over the years, and that's a bit of an understatement. But relations, of course, have been particularly bad between the Zimbabwean authorities and opposition activists. And by having a very kind of private, little low-key hotel with kind of gates around you, although a lot of the houses in Harare are gated in any case, it means that we can talk to people in private if they don't want to be seen giving interviews, if they're worried about people following them. It's very, very private, and that helps us talk to as many people as possible, because one of the things that any journalist who will tell you covering Zimbabwe over the years is it's just like really, really difficult to get people to speak to you freely because they're so intimidated. Fear, corruption, violence, those have been the pillars of the state in Zimbabwe for decades now, and that's why what's happening in the country right now is so exciting for people, but so fearful as well, because they don't really know what the outcome is. So we're open for questions. This is my first Facebook Live, so bear with me, and I'm going to look and see if there are any questions. Looks like we have a couple. This is Daniel Faria asking, is the situation tense in Harare? Not really right now, I'd say. People are feeling angry, insulted, really, I think, because, you know, we saw hundreds of thousands of people out on the street over the weekend on Saturday demanding that Mugabe step down. And for them, it was kind of an unprecedented thing because, as I said before, you know, they're so frightened to go out and do these demonstrations. And everybody was expecting Mugabe to resign, and he didn't last night. They're still kind of waiting to hear what the next process is. The ruling party is saying, you know, we're going to launch impeachment process. We're waiting to hear a statement from the generals because they're the ones, of course, who are really in charge here, and people consider them kind of heroes. But we were out at some protests this morning at the university. Good-natured. I mean, you know, any kind of gathering in most African countries, especially in southern Africa, involve a bit of a party atmosphere. There's music and stuff. Unless things turn, you know, violent. They haven't so far. Things are calm. But there's going to be another big demonstration tomorrow, and I think it'll be a lot angrier than the one we saw on Saturday, if that answers your question. Now we have Joyce K. Do you feel safe there? Yeah, I'd say that we feel pretty safe right now. I think for journalists, they're not letting foreign journalists in. They've sort of stopped their visa process. I don't think that the army is worried about what we're doing. Kind of the message we got early on was from people locally is if you're not kind of going after them, they're not going to go after you. People have been fairly kind. In the past, some of in particular the Zanu-PF party gangs could be quite hostile to journalists, but those gangs are busy turning on President Mugabe, the person they used to support. So we haven't really felt too insecure here at all. What is the likely fate? This is Gary A. Officer. Is that Gary A. Officer? I don't know. Anyway, Gary, what is the likely fate of the Mugabes if he's impeached? I think it's a good question because I wonder, you know, I think Mugabe's trying to run down the clock. He is not going to do what people tell him as long as he has any freedom to be his own man. That's his hallmark over the years. You know, he is a strong character. if he's impeached, I mean, that would mean, presumably, he might be open for legal procedures against him. And a lot of the people that we've spoken here would like to see him stand trial for crimes committed during his tenure. But you have to remember that the people holding him right now, his captors, the generals, are people who have supported him over the years. They will have economic interests in this country that Mugabe knows about. And the same said for Zanu-PF, the ruling party. A lot of the people who've turned on him are old cronies, and they will have benefited from the patronage system that Mugabe had in place all these years. Would they, you know, he'll have a bit of leverage. And the other thing is that they continue to say they want to treat him with dignity. There is, in Zimbabwe, a great reverence towards the elderly, a culture of respect towards the elderly, and Mugabe's benefiting from that right now. So I think they will try to usher them out before it gets to a point where they might be facing jail terms, and that's what everybody says they've been negotiating for a few days. The Mugabes have a lot of money stashed outside of the country. They have homes in places like the United Arab Emirates, Malaysia. So I think that they would probably choose, if it comes down to that, an exit that allows them to just go and enjoy those bank accounts, I guess. Now we have Doug Walker. Will he be replaced by a military dictator? Another really good question, because Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is the person that the military kind of stepped in to protect, he was a vice president of Mugabe, an old fellow veteran of the Liberation Wars, Mugabe's former intelligence chief, a very feared man in Zimbabwe. He was in a power struggle with Mugabe's wife, Grace. He was fired, sent out, and the military stepped in to protect him, to bring Mnangagwa back. So they're like that. General Chawinga is also a member, a fighter from the Liberation War. He does not have strong democratic credentials. He's one of the people who in the past has been on sanctions lists. The United States, Canada also has sanctions against Zimbabwe in place since 2008 because of the election there and the election violence that took place. And Mnangagwa is very much associated with that, as well as human rights abuses in the 1980s in Matabeleland, when an estimated 20,000 people were either tortured or killed. These are the people who are, the keys of the kingdom are being handed to. And a lot of people that we speak to say they worry about that. This isn't a democratic revolution of the people. This is an internal party revolution. And it's unclear what's going to happen. I think that there probably is genuine anger at the state of the country. It's bankrupt here. Mugabe can't afford to pay for support anymore because the bottom of the barrel has been scraped dry. We spoke to a young man at the university this morning who said, I'm really, 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 really afraid that the man that they're putting in power is actually not going to be any different, and that even if they have fair elections tomorrow, the army would likely, their candidate would win, Mnangagwa would win, because they're so popular, because they're the people who are pushing Mugabe out. So the opposition activists would say they're really, really worried about it, but they're also going to tell you that they're willing to take the chance because this has been going on for 4 decades. This is a question from Howard Geldart, is there a threat of civil war? I'm not sure about that. I think, the people with the guns are still the army. The police have in past been loyal to Mugabe. The opposition doesn't have that kind of weaponry. They don't have the control of the state. They're not that organized or unified. I don't think that that's a possibility right now. I think it's kind of more of a question of whether the opposition can take this moment, this opportunity to jump in and actually mobilize in a way that they haven't been able to do before without fear of violence. Does it awaken something in their hearts? You know, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But I think civil war is not on the horizon. John McNally is asking, where is Grace Mugabe? And will there be free elections soon? I'd have a big scoop if I could tell you where Grace was, I think. There were really early rumors that she had fled already to Namibia. Then they were kind of discounted. We haven't seen her at all, which is quite rare. You know, you saw Mugabe going out to this graduation ceremony on Friday. He was let out of house arrest to go and confer degrees on young students. Normally that's something you'd think that Grace would attend with him. She didn't. She was nowhere in sight last night in this address. Most people think that she is in one of their residences and staying there because she is a very hated figure in this country. And I think her life would be in danger, actually. So she will be, I'm quite sure, trying to figure out whether her husband's going to be able to stay. Even if he were to stay in some kind of hypothetical world, I think Grace is going to have to exit the stage. She could go across to South Africa. She has a number of houses there. That's where her sons are believed to be right now as well. And I think you had a second question. Free elections, yeah. Elections are scheduled for 2018 anyway. Free and fair. Zimbabwe doesn't have a great history of that. And again, it depends on whether or not if it does turn out that Mnangagwa becomes the president of Zimbabwe, or an interim president, whether he whether he decides this is a change for him in the course of the direction he's followed so far, and then he's going to actually ensure that does happen, perhaps create a transitional government where he brings in opposition figures who are trusted by the people and creates kind of a secure environment, because violence during elections in Zimbabwe is a classic tactic to keep people away from the polls. I keep losing my place. I apologize. Can people go out and make their business? Yeah, actually things are functioning quite normally. They weren't when we first arrived, which was Thursday, I think, right, guys? Yeah. So the streets were quite calm. Not very many people out on the streets, but businesses were still functioning. A lot of people would be telling their kids and stuff, don't go out, etc. Things weren't becoming clear. But yeah, everything is open for business right now. Can you travel anywhere in the country? We haven't tried, but I think so, yeah. I have a friend or a contact who works in the tourism industry, and he has some properties or hotels up in Vic Falls and other parts of the country. He said, all border crossings are functioning as normal. There would be checkpoints on the road in and out of Harare for sure. There are soldiers around. The airport, the international airport, just recently renamed the Robert Mugabe Airport. So yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I haven't tested it, but I think things are probably free-flowing here. How will it impact regional politics? That's another good question, because, we see South Africa about to go through a big political change on a certain level, in that Jacob Zuma is expected to step down as head of the African National Congress. And that means that whoever succeeds him will likely be the next leader in South Africa. And now, South Africa has always had an important influence in Zimbabwe. Jacob Zuma has, extended a hand towards Mugabe in the past, and South African mediators were asked to come last week, I think it was Friday, to try to convince Mugabe to step down willingly. And some people say that there are parallels, because Jacob Zuma is facing a corruption scandal in South Africa. Will what's going on here impact what goes on there in the election for the head of the ANC, which is between one of Jacob Zuma's ex-wives and Cyril Ramaphosa, who is an old friend of Jacob Zuma, but more business-oriented much like Emerson Mnangagwa is. So people are making some comparisons. Some of the other things that have happened is that Southern African countries have come together to try to influence the situation here, and people get quite exercised about that. You know, the South African development community, Southern African development community, they don't like to think of the neighbors getting involved in what's going on here. So I'm just going to take a little pause here just to remind everybody, or to say hi to people who are joining us. We are in Harare, a CBC team. We've been here since last week, covering the end of the Mugabe era, is what a lot of people would say, although some people are still a little nervous that maybe it's not over. And we're taking questions on Facebook, so you can submit them if you like. Michael Kalura asks if Zimbabwe has gold or oil. I don't know about oil. I don't think so. They've got diamonds here, and actually that's been a really big story here, and it's one of the things people wonder about now. One of the reasons why people dislike Grace Mugabe so much is that she was rumored to, and actually of her hand in one of the diamond mines. And in fact, in the WikiLeaks papers that came out in 2007, in some of the dispatches by the U.S. diplomats here, they actually talked about this, and about Grace Mugabe having her own private army of diggers. So that's what people really worry about in a way when it comes to an exit. And then what happens to the diamond mines and who controls them? There are rumors, for instance, that Mnangagwa also has his hands in some of the diamond mining industry. You know, there's very little transparency. I'm trying to remember the number. I think Zimbabwe is something like 154th out of 175 possible countries in terms of, you know, lack of transparency. It's really at the bottom of the league. Alistair Lax asks, Zimbabweans seem to be hoping that Mugabe's leaving will be the start of a turn in their economic fortunes. Is there any sign that a new government could undo the damage that's been done, or has Zimbabwe lost something it can't get back? I think that most economists would tell you that this country can bounce back. It has enormous potential. It has enormous potential in its people, first of all. Zimbabweans have a very high literacy rate, and that's one of the things that people, when they think about Mugabe and what good he's done for the country, they will say that when he first came to power, one of the first things that he did was to ensure that education became widespread and that it was free for people. So you do have a high literacy rate, but you have loads of people who are very well educated with nowhere to go, no jobs. So they're out here waiting for that kind of external investment. Zimbabwe used to be the breadbasket of Southern Africa. The violence surrounding the land invasions or appropriations after 2000 really destroyed the farming industry. Mugabe took a lot of the land owned by white minority farmers and redistributed it, not to people who actually had experience in agriculture, but to other war veterans. So it was kind of a form of patronage, and that really impacted the economy here. It has huge potential, obviously, in terms of the tourism. Victoria Falls is a very big draw. They have a number of really amazing game reserves with extraordinary wildlife. And I think that if they could get some of the public financing under control, some of the taxation or the corruption under control, things would start to stabilize. I would say that, I mean, that economy is not my strong point, but the economists I have talked to believe that the country could turn around if it didn't have so many people pulling from little pots of public spending. I'm just going to have to dial in here again. Daniel Osorio asks, what can Canada do to bring some sort of stability to the situation? Canada has a really good reputation here. I think the opposition activists that we've talked to would say what they would like to see is that in this next process, continue to bring pressure on the new leaders, whoever they may be, to try to insist on some kind of an observation role in the elections if and when they come, just to keep that kind of transparency, that push for transparency outside observance of what's going on inside. That's what people say they would like to see from the Canadian government here. David Robertson, what position are the Canadian government reps and businesses in mining taking? I'm not sure. I haven't really spoken to anybody along that, so I'm going to pass on your questions. That question, apologies. I don't really know. The Canadian government right now, we have a Canadian embassy here. They're hugely helpful and informative, and but again, we also do have a number of sanctions. It's still in place. So, but I'm not sure. I haven't talked to too many Canadian businesses with mining interests here. Why was the Zimbabwe economics so damaged? That's from Papan. I think I answered that just a moment ago. You know, a lot of it has been that it is a government that has propped itself up through patronage. If you look at the lifestyle of the Mugabes, he constantly is leaving for Singapore for medical treatment. They have huge numbers of amounts of money in various bank accounts around the world. They have the diamond mines. Even last year they were selling elephants to China because they've become so bankrupt they couldn't even pay salaries. So I think it's a combination of what we're talking about, the destruction of the economy in the 2000s with some of the way in which land reform was handled, and then the need to basically prop up his regime and his support by making sure people had houses, land, pensions, and that's the war veterans, the people who are some of them who are clamoring now so hard to see Mugabe go. Broke with him a year ago. They broke with him because he stopped paying into their pensions, etc. They saw that money going to his wife Grace instead of them. Not much of it going down to the man on the street or the woman on the street. So I've locked myself out again. Usher Katz asks, can you compare Mugabe to Gadhafi? I don't know, it's hard to compare dictators, I guess. I think you can compare, obviously, people who become corrupted, perhaps maligned by the power that they hold. There are commonalities, I think, in people who do reach that power and manage to hang on for so long, and certainly there's a level of brutality that can be comparable, but that's a kind of a tough one for me. So we have a YouTube viewer asking a question. What is the current situation in Zimbabwe right now? Has Mugabe's resignation been announced? Only if it happened while we're on the air here, and I don't think so. I think we would hear something around it. No, there were some rumors earlier in the day that he was going to mail in his resignation, and that's why he didn't. But the rumor mill has been crazy here, and you kind of can't really believe what you're reading on social media. You have to wait for the official announcements. We're still waiting for a statement from the military. I think that's what people really want to hear. They want the military to say what's going on. I mean, we dubbed you the heroes, our heroes, on Saturday. I mean, we saw these amazing scenes of people kind of going out and kind of mobbing cars and kind of, taking their scarves and cleaning the windshields and things like that, kissing these soldiers who were kind of embarrassed by it. They see them as liberators. Well, they're waiting to see if, in fact, they've really been liberated. So I think we are winding down on the number of questions, so I think we're going to wrap up. But thank you very much for your attention and for your questions. It's nice to get to chat with you this way, and thanks for joining us.